Question number 19 really just asks us how we got our information from question number 18. We already know that Forte agent was one of our sources for finding this NNTP server. So what about Outlook Express down here? So we can take a look at that, and you'll notice that there are not any INI files. That's because Outlook is made by Windows. So naturally, rather than that Linux type of configuration, they're going to configure things through the registry and through other Windows files and folders that they have set up specifically for that purpose. So we can look through these a little bit, and you're going to see references to NNTP. However, they're basically just going to direct you right back to the software registry hive. So I don't remember where exactly that was. I've got a screenshot of it in the walkthrough, but that's just something to take note of for later, that basically you can find it in Outlook, but it's not going to be directly there. You have to go to that registry hive. Now, if you were to comb through here real closely, you might eventually find that this msim.in.exe file way down here, it actually has a few settings to it, and you can see it has a news URL and another couple of news client related values, and basically it just takes you back to that software registry key there. So while you can't directly find this information here, you do know where to look thanks to these Outlook Express files. So that's your start. The next thing that we can do to try to look for this is we could do a keyword search for NNTP. We're looking for servers after all. You'll notice the first couple of things, log file and MFT. MFT is where the Windows file system called NTFS stores basic information about all of its files. So the fact that there's something called nntp.lst is a good sign, but we don't really know based on this where that is. You can always parse the MFT with other modules and other tools entirely, but let's just keep looking through this for now. The next thing that you're going to see is all these files that start with F. And what these are carved files, basically files that have been deleted on the system or otherwise aren't accessible, but Autopsy is still able to read that there's a file there and make some sense of it. These names are an indication of where on the disk it's located. I covered this some in my last walkthrough, but they all start with F. So when you're looking through these keywords, one thing I hadn't mentioned before is that you've got these little arrows here on whichever file you happen to click on, and that's going to take you to all of your matches for your keyword. You see we've got NNTP there a few different times, so that's really going to help you parse through anything like this. We have number 503 somewhere in here if you were to just keep looking through them. It's this last one, and it does actually tell you the NNTP server. So you finally got something there that you can use, even though it's not entirely clear where this came from. And ultimately what this question is asking is, where did you get this information? Because we already found it before. So much for that idea. Moving on though, if we keep looking at these results by location, and you can expand this out a little bit more to see what's going on, we have all of these local settings files, and they are DBX files, and if you start looking through them, you'll realize that these appear to be news feeds in and of themselves. He's got something about beginner hacking here, and you can see where it's coming from. You can see a little bit about the news server and what it's actually doing. None of these are the answer though. So while these are various feeds that this user has subscribed to, none of them actually tell you which server they're coming from, unfortunately. So we will have to keep looking. Next up, into user.dat. As you may recall, this is pretty darn useful, and we'll cover it later, but it does actually tell you the NNTP server. So referencing the registry is obviously going to be really useful for information such as this. It even tells you his password right here for that server. The search also contains results in the program files folder, which we've already covered. Number 20 asks us to find 5 news groups that Mr. Evil has subscribed to, and as you may recall, we already happened upon that during our string search for NNTP. All of these DBX files were different news feeds. So that's one place to find our answer. If you keep on scrolling down, NNTP kind of makes sense as something to keep looking through. The other location that you could have found it was these .dat files under the program files Forte agent data folder, same place that we found that INI folder from earlier that we used so extensively. Next up in question 21, we're looking for a program called MIRC. It's an internet relay chat. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably some kind of freeware that would not have been a part of Windows naturally, part of the Microsoft suite. So I'm going to look under program files, guessing that the configuration files are going to be in there with all of that. And look at that, we've got several INI files in here. And if we look at what appears to be the main one, because the name matches the name of the program, we find some user information in here, and that's going to match our answers. Then it asks us to find logs of those chats. So we'll open this up, and what do you know? Logs are right there. That's what's great about freeware. It's all very open and easy to find anything in it. So in number 23, they give us a location, the My Documents directory, and ask us to find a reassembled TCP session for Ethereal, which is a packet capture software. So it's a little bit deceptive because there is a My Documents folder up here, and that's not actually it. You have to go to Documents and Settings, and then you see the user here, Mr. Evil, and then you see this other My Documents folder, which is also not it. Scroll down a little bit further, and interception is actually the name of this file. So if we look at what's inside of it, this is the stream of data that was sent between some client and some server and captured by this guy. So if we take a look at it, you don't have to know how to do packet captures and network traffic to sort of piece this together. Luckily, it's actually a lot of my job. But if you look right here, HTTP 1.1302 found, that's the start of one of the packets, and 302 is actually the HTTP header. Those are a good indication of what's going on because you can easily look up that number, and also they kind of have a little word or two afterwards to tell you what's going on. So in this case, you know that that's coming from a server because of the type that it is, which means it's a response because that is a response code to the client. So you go up here a little bit, and GET is what's going on. It's a GET request. The client is asking the server for something, which is HM folder, ASBX, all that. But that's not what we're concerned with. They want to know the operating system. And if you look right here, UAOS, that's User Agent Operating System. And Windows CE Pocket PC, if you look that up, it's some tiny little, can't even remember what they're called, a Palm Pilot. So now you can add paleontology to your resume because you found this thing. Next up, they want to know what website the victim was accessing. So if you come down on the request a little bit further, referrer, that's the person that sent them there. Host here is going to be the website that is being requested, and this field exists because there are a lot of different websites on a single server nowadays. So this allows you to differentiate which one you're actually requesting. So for number 26 here, it asks us for web-based email address that this guy is using. So we know it's not going to be Outlook or Forte Agent this time because we're looking at the web. So it makes sense to start by looking at the web bookmarks, which we did before, but paying more attention this time, we see Hotmail and MSN. Those are both Microsoft email services, so there's a good chance that those just came with Internet Explorer by default and don't really tell us anything. So let's just move on to the user's web history here. We can sort it by date accessed, descending, and just sort of scroll through their history. If there's not too terribly much of it, I mean, there is going to be quite a bit. So let's just open this up, make it a little bit easier. You could also sort by domain. The problem with doing that is it doesn't really account for subdomains. So you can see we've got this tribal fusion, but it starts with an A, so it's all the way up at the A's. If there was a B or anything else, it would be far away from it. So when you do date accessed, you're getting something that's more like his actual web sessions that he went through over time. And if you just start scrolling down and looking at the domain over here, before long you'll start to see Yahoo. We know that that's an email, and it's got his username logged as part of it. So good job, Autopsy, finding that for us there. You can see it actually has something with mail here. If you look through these, you'll find a little bit of information, but not much. It's under billing, so you wouldn't really necessarily expect to see a lot happening there. This is a free email service. I'm not even sure why that's coming up. But if you keep going, you'll see another mail one, and this one includes the phrase login as part of the URL, so that's a pretty good hint. If we look through this, we can see it's still Mr. Evil. Obviously, he's the only one that's done anything. So if we go to the text, then maybe we can find a little bit something more. And there's his username. Let's just copy all of this into a text file once again. And we can do a search for just at, see if we can maybe find his email address somewhere in here. And if you keep going for a minute, oh, I must have passed it. Right, so after looking for a minute, I realized there's actually more than one of these. If you go down a little bit further, this one actually has his username over here, which is a good sign, and it's a login one. So we'll look at the text for that, take it, copy it, paste it in, and now we can find his actual email address that we've been looking for. If you just scroll through it, or seeing as how we know the answer already, I'll just give you some time here. There it is, Yahoo Mail. It happened when he visited this login URL here, and that's our answer. So even having done that before, that was still a little bit confusing. Luckily, there is a much better way. If you go to the timeline up here, then it might take a minute to open, but it's going to be worth it, and you're going to want to know how to do this anyways. So once you get here, you can see that there are events going way, way back. It's not that that stuff actually happened on this system, it's that some of these Windows files were written a really long time ago and then put on this system. So you can zoom in on your time window by changing these, which for some reason isn't working for me today, but that's okay. You can also just click and hold and highlight a little area and then hit this little magnifying glass, and there we've got just those few months. And if you've been paying attention, pretty much everything we've looked at was in August, so let's just zoom in a little bit further on that. Now we can go over to our filters over here, and What I actually want to look at is event types and web activity only. So I'm going to get rid of the file system events, these miscellaneous ones, and nothing custom. And we can just hit apply, and there we've got the events that we care about. Now we can change this over to details and get a look at them. And you can see there's a fair amount going on here from that day, but we should be able to just find our Yahoo and anything else, and there it is. So all of the Yahoo subdomains are going to be together with this one, and that's what's nice. You can expand it with this little plus here, and it's all in a timeline together. So we see one with mail, but there's probably going to be a better one that has something to do with login, and there's something right there. We can click on that, and you can see we've got these F613s just like last time, but this time they're all together. So there isn't that worry of which one is going to be the right one so much, because you can just take a look at them. We don't have that same little user one to tell us which one is correct, but if you look through this and look through the text, you'll find that same email address as last time, the Mr. Evil Rules one. So we've pretty much found our answer there. And as long as you know how to work it, then this is pretty much just an easier way of accomplishing the same thing. So next we're looking for where Yahoo Mail saves its emails on the system. So we'll get out of this timeline view here. And as you may recall, we looked for email addresses earlier. So here they are, all of them. And you can just highlight this, and since we know what email we're looking for, we start typing it, and there it is. We can double click it, and there's all the places that it comes from. And we've got the file paths over here, which will be helpful in determining which one might actually contain it. This one's different than the rest, so maybe that's it. Index.dat. It's loading. This doesn't look like it's actually emails, so let's just try a couple others. So here it is, it's the second showletter.htm one, and we've got examples of emails coming to the Mr. Evil account there. So that's our answer. Next up, question 28 asks us how many executables are in the recycle bin. So each user has their own recycle bin, but it's all under this recycler main folder here, and that changes with different versions of Windows. This is XP, so it's going to be older, but this is the user's SID, which is a unique identifier for each user on the system. And you can see we have these 4 executables here, so that's question 28 answered real easily. Next it asks, are these files really deleted? Now, you probably already know this, but in Windows, when you delete something, it doesn't really wipe it from the disk or anything, if that's what they're asking here. It just deallocates it, which means that the space is marked as free and it'll be overwritten when it's needed. However, if we look at these, you can look over here under flags, they're allocated, or file metadata under the tab down here, their allocation status. So they haven't even been marked for overwrite yet. Sending them to the recycle bin, at least in XP here, doesn't immediately deallocate them. That happens when more space is needed in the recycle bin itself. If you want to learn a bit more about recycle bin forensics, I would highly recommend looking at 13 Cubed videos on it. It's a pretty short little thing, and it'll give you a few tools. Number 30 asks us which files are actually reported deleted by the file system. You could interpret this as referring back to the last question with the recycle bin, in which case you could take a look at it here. Sorry, I got out of that. But there's this info2 file, and that's because this is Windows XP. That isn't there in later versions of Windows, but it lists each of the files for whatever reason twice, but there are 4 unique files, so we've got 4 reported as in the recycle bin if you think that's what they mean by deleted. The other thing we could look at is all the files that have been deallocated by the file system but still show. And for that, we're going to want to go to the deleted files view over here. And you can see file system, we've got 365, and all we've got 1356. File system refers to the ones that the file system is actually showing as unallocated, but still potentially there. All is everything, including what Autopsy can carve, which is why we have so many of these F files with all the numbers after them, just like we saw under carved files earlier. So 365 probably seems like the answer they're looking for, but if you look at the answer key, it actually just says 3 for some reason. I've checked other people's walkthroughs, I've looked around. I'm guessing they meant to type 365 and just missed the 65 or something. So last question, it wants you to do a virus scan, which you don't really need to do here. The interesting items module already has you covered. It found something called a possible zip bomb, and it's been previously tagged by me because I did this before. But if you go into it here, you can see why it flagged it as interesting. The archive is zipped more than 4 times, and so it's going to skip it from processing in certain ways that allows it to do something that it shouldn't, apparently. So that's what they're getting at with that question. If you actually wanted to virus scan it, there's a tool called Arsenal Image Mounter, which would allow you to mount all of the files in this image onto your Windows box as a drive, just like your C drive. And then you can just right click scan it with whatever virus scanner you've got. I used WebRoot, and all I got was a whole bunch of false positives based on the command line logs and the hacking apps he has, like Cain and Abel, but it didn't actually find the zip bomb, so sorry, WebRoot.